What if my boss finds out I'm a fraud? Maybe I'll end up going to prison or something. What if I've left the stove on and my house just blows up in flames? What if there's a meteor strike and the whole earth is destroyed? Have you ever noticed your mind jumping to these extreme scenarios all by itself? Why do we even do this to ourselves? Well, interestingly, the brain might actually enjoy it. What I was doing here was worrying. Worry is where we mentally rehearse possible problems, and it involves anticipating threats, imagining potential problems, and exhausting our cognitive resources long before any actual danger occurs. But where does the word worry come from? Well, the word worry comes from the Old English worjan, meaning to strangle or to choke. Even in its origins, the language suggested that worry constricts the mind, creating tension and mental strain. Throughout history, humans have struggled with worry. Ancient texts describe it as universal human burden, one that both warned of danger, but also made life more difficult than it needed to be. Ancient philosophers worried too. Philosophers viewed worry as an inherent part of human freedom and awareness of mortality. It's a sign that we're conscious and engaged with the future. But how have people actually managed worry over time? For thousands of years, people performed daily prayers, offerings, and divination rituals to appease the gods or predict the future. These practices were aimed at reducing anxiety about natural disasters, illness, or crop failure. Daily prayers, offerings, or pilgrimages were their way of externalizing worry and getting a sense of control. Worry can also reveal empathy and moral concern, and this shows how deeply worry connects us to the world around us. Understanding why humans worry is one thing, but what actually happens in the brain when we do it? When we worry, the brain engages in several interconnected neural circuits that respond as if a real threat was present. The amygdala, the brain's fire alarm system which processes fear and emotional salience, becomes highly active, signaling potential danger and triggering the body's stress system. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning and planning, also attempts to anticipate and evaluate possible outcomes, and this generates repetitive what-if scenarios. The hippocampus is also involved in memory, and it recalls past experiences that inform perceived threats, and this activates the body's natural alarm system. This releases stress hormones such as cortisol, which heightens vigilance, increases heart rate, and it primes the body for action. This is called the fight or flight response, and many of you have probably heard of this before. When we produce high levels of cortisol for long periods, excess cortisol can reduce the growth of new neurons and even cause shrinkage in parts of the hippocampus. Okay, let's go deeper. Why do we worry? Our ancestors, being alert to potential threats like predators, natural disasters, or even hostile members of the group, was crucial for survival. Worry functioned as a kind of mental early warning system, and it kept our ancestors alive. It kept them vigilant and prepared to respond quickly. By mentally rehearsing possible dangers, they could anticipate problems and take preventative action. This would increase their chance of survival, and in this sense, worry was adaptive. But if worry is adaptive in some circumstances, why is it not in others? We aren't faced with hungry lions or dangerous predators like we used to be. So does being conscious of our worries actually make us more burdened? Well, let's focus inward and go a little deeper. Our mind doesn't like ambiguity. When things feel uncertain, we can feel out of control. So we worry, and people who struggle with uncertainty can perceive ambiguous situations as threatening. They typically seek to avoid potential problems that occur, and this triggers persistent worrying. People engage in worry to try and anticipate problems and prepare for threats or attempt to gain a sense of control. But worry has significant effects on cognition. It can impair attention and concentration, it can make simple tasks feel mentally exhausting, and by holding multiple negative scenarios in mind, worry overloads our working memory and reduces the ability to solve problems or make decisions effectively. But there's also an attentional bias towards perceiving threats. For example, exaggerating the likelihood or severity of negative events. This makes it harder to notice neutral or positive information. Remember how chronic worry can shrink the brain? Chronic worry can further interfere with learning and memory, as prolonged stress can impair the storage and recall of new memories. But do we worry too much? How much of your worries actually come true? Well, interestingly, research indicates that about 85 to 95% of our worries never actually come true. So maybe we are worrying a bit too much. But as we said earlier, sometimes worrying serves a purpose. In small doses, stress can actually enhance performance. It's called the Yerkes-Dodson law. When we worry about an upcoming task, the brain interprets it as a potential threat or challenge. But this activates hormones like adrenaline, which heightens alertness, sharpens attention, and improves short-term memory. The state of optimal anxiety can actually motivate preparation, encourage us to practice, and help us anticipate possible problems before they even happen. Our brains are wired to pick up on the emotional states of others. Mirror neurons and other empathy-related circuits in the brain activate, and this causes us to vicariously experience others' stress. This means that even if we are safe, simply being around a worried person can actually trigger our own worry and our physiological stress responses such as increased heart rate or heightened vigilance. Social cues like facial expressions, tone of voice, or even the content of a conversation can all amplify this effect. Why do we worry so much to the point of where we feel like we can't switch it off? Each time we worry, we often experience a brief sense of control or preparedness, as if anticipating problems gives us an advantage, and to some extent it can. But the problem with this is it produces a psychological reward, and over time the brain starts to associate worrying with this temporary relief that we get, and this creates a feedback loop. The mind seeks out worry because it feels like a coping strategy, even though it's ultimately unhelpful. Neural circuits which involve the amygdala, which signals threats, and the prefrontal cortex, which tries to plan and problem solve, become repeatedly activated. These reinforced pathways make worry automatic, so the brain defaults to it whenever uncertainty arises. Interestingly, worry doesn't just impact the brain and the mind, but it also impacts the body as well. Short-term worry can actually boost the immune system. When the brain perceives a potential threat, it triggers the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis, and the sympathetic nervous system, and this releases stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. In small doses and brief episodes, these hormones can actually mobilize immune cells, increasing inflammation and enhancing the body's ability to respond to infection or injury. But chronic worry has the opposite effect. Prolonged activation of the stress response keeps levels of cortisol and other stress hormones elevated for extended periods, and high cortisol over time can suppress the body's production and effectiveness of immune cells, reducing the body's ability to fight infections. Chronic worry is also linked to increased inflammation, which can contribute to long-term health problems such as cardiovascular disease, autoimmune disorders, and slower wound healing. Someone who worries a lot is not simply a warrior. They are a warrior, rehearsing potential threats and strategizing in their mind. Yet when worry becomes excessive, it can feel suffocating, as if the mind itself can't breathe, turning a protective mechanism into a source of exhaustion. As Epictetus said, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do, and you will go on well." You see, the mind doesn't know the difference between real and imagined scenarios. It responds as if they're real. All these thoughts become real in our brain and body when we feel them in our mind. It's normal to worry, it's part of what makes us human. But if you worry too much, what would it be like just to step outside of that for a moment? Recognizing it as a habit of the mind rather than a reflection of reality can be freeing. You don't have to fight every imagined battle. You can learn to observe your thoughts, to give yourself permission to let go, to breathe, to rest, and to live. I'm going to leave you with this last question. How much of your life have you lost to fears that never came true? Thanks for watching, and as always, until next time.